Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Admissions Live. I am your host, Ashley Hennigan, and tonight we'll be talking about first-generation perspectives through the admissions process. Before we get the show started, I want to give a few shout-outs to my sponsors, starting with Integral. Integral is sponsoring Admissions Live this year. They are the creators of the Schools app on Facebook. Check out their webinar series about how to provide social networks, increase your yield and retention. They have a webinar series each week that's going to be happening this Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and we are sending out a tweet with that link to their webinar series right now. Second up, we have Scavenger. Scavenger is also sponsoring Admissions Live this year, and they are a Google-funded mobile game about going places, doing challenges, and earning points. Learn how Penn State leveraged the Scavenger platform to engage prospective students during their Spend a Summer Day visit program. Got a tweet about that program coming out to you as well. Our very next sponsor is Welcome to College, who believes that it's all in the college visit. They've created a web and mobile application to help institutions measure and manage the most critical part of their recruitment portfolio, which is the college visit. Now with over 15,000 ratings on Welcome to College on their site, you can check out how prospective students and parents are rating their college visit experiences. So I have a tweet with the top-rated colleges at Welcome to College, and we'll send that out right now. And last, but certainly not least, is Zinch, Zinch.com, the leader in social admissions. Over 3 million students log on worldwide to Zinch.com and connect with over 1,000 colleges and universities from around the globe. Zinch is changing the game in prospective student recruitment. Learn more about the largest college search social network by emailing outreach@zinch.com or tweet at social admissions. I have a last link for you from Zinch. Alrighty. And I'm coming back to you. Tonight I'm joined by Michael Szarek. He is the founder of College Counseling for the Rest of Us, and we're really excited to be talking about first-generation perspectives throughout the college admissions process. Michael's spent most of his career working with first-generation students. He spent about 23 years on the admissions side of things, working at universities in the New York and New Jersey metropolitan area. And the last 2 years, he's been working as an independent counselor at his company, College Counseling for the Rest of Us. Michael was also a first-generation student himself, so he can speak a little bit from his experience, but he really knows his stuff about what families are going through, and I'm really excited to get him on to talk to you. But first, we're going to do a little segment that I like to call Admissions Headlines. And over on our admissions headlines this week, I have a few articles, just a couple things that I want to bring to your attention. And the first one is an article that the Chronicle wrote just this past week, and then Mashable picked it up. A few other blogs picked up this story about Unigo. They're a company that's offering online video chats with admissions professionals for $100 an hour. The company's services proved to be a controversial topic, but really this is not a new concept. It might be a new platform, I suppose, but the Chronicle article makes reference to the lack of adequate college counseling. I kind of find it hard to believe that they're going after the access issue for $100 an hour. It does prove, however, that there is a demand in the market for college counseling. And in 3 weeks, this company has hosted over 500 video chats with counselors. So check that out. Let me know what you think. I'll be sending a tweet out with a copy of that article for you. The next headline that I want to bring to your attention is a little shout out to Deborah Sanborn for continuing the conversation about higher ed relevance over on her blog, 18 in Life. She makes reference to a couple other articles and arguments, so I'm going to encourage you all to check out that post. And again, let's continue this conversation. Is college worth it? Is what she is talking about, and I think it is a question worth asking. Last up in our headlines, over at Rob Zinkin's blog today, he posted 5 questions with Seth Godin. This is a really great read, really calling out higher education. I don't want to give too much away, but as you might expect from Seth Godin, this post is full of bold statements. My favorite one being, and I quote, "The business of higher education is going to change as much in the next decade as newspapers did in the prior one." So lots of bold statements from Seth Godin over there. Again, props to Rob for his collaboration with Godin on this post. Really, really cool post. So that is coming out to you to check out. And that's what we got. We're almost ready to start the show. I do want to give a unsolicited shout out of the week to the one and only Robin to go. Robin is the premier disruptive technologist at Penn State and a force to be reckoned with within higher education. So please join me in wishing Robin a very happy birthday today. We love you, Robin, and I hope you are enjoying it. Without further ado, I would like to say hello to my guest, Michael Szarek. I'm going to bring him on screen right now. We're going to get this conversation started about first-generation students, what they're going through in this messy process that we call college admission. So, hi, Michael. How are you doing?
Hello, Ashley. I'm doing well.
Great.
Thank you.
Very happy to have you on tonight. I'm ready to get this conversation started, and I am excited to be checking along the Admissions Live hashtag to hear what other people have to think about our conversation and hopefully ask some questions and collaborate with us. Yes, that is the hashtag, Admissions Live. I love it. We've got props tonight. So let's get started. Let's talk about these first-generation students. And before we get started, I think it's important to kind of ask, who are these students? What is this demographic? I know there's what we think of a traditional first-generation student, but there's actually a lot more to first-generation than that traditional student that we think of.
Various and sundry. I think a lot of what we're going to talk tonight about covers, it's the same advice you'd give to second and third generation students because it's such a various and sundry group of students. You have what we think of as your traditional first generation college students, those who parents did not go to college, grandparents did not go to college. You also have, though, first generation college, first generation American, where this is the first generation in the United States as well as the first generation to go to college. You also have, though, students where the parents may have gone to college, but in another country. So while the parents know college and they've experienced college, they haven't experienced the American system and all the idiosyncrasies of EFC and SAT and ACT and all of that good stuff. So that's another group.
Right.
And a growing group is the first generation adult college student, probably the least talked about and probably the most lost group. So, and I'm probably missing some groups in there, but at least 4 major groups.
Yeah, and one of those, that first generation American group, I see a lot of when I'm doing recruiting in the New York City area, and it's such a diverse group of students, not only going through this process for the first time, but also a lot of them going through this process on their own when they're dealing with language barriers or cultural barriers that their parents are facing. So, there's a big difference in each population when you're talking about first generation. So I think it's important to outline all of those. And
I was just going to say, I
sure.
think it's part of it is you can't group these groups. I think a lot of
Right.
it has to do with treating the individuals as individuals and what their particular needs are in terms of that family arrangement. It's all, everyone's different.
Right. Great point. So as we're going through our conversation tonight, let's keep those other populations of first-generation students in mind, outside of that traditional first-generation student that you might consider the first student out of the family who is going off into a four-year college experience. So going out and starting this college search process, how is that going to be different for a first-generation student? I know it's kind of a loaded question, but I think it's where we all are getting started with this.
I think the biggest issue is trusting their gut. They don't have an adult who's been through the process before. They're working with a parent or parents who are not familiar with the process, may not be comfortable with the language. So the clients I've worked with, they tend to have good instincts. They just don't trust their instincts. They don't know who to rely on. They don't know whether they should be trusting this person or this admissions counselor or this service online or this college guidebook. And they don't know where to turn. So oftentimes they're turning to Aunt Jane or Uncle Joe, but they really don't know who are the experts, who do they rely on.
Right, and that's a great point to make. When they're going through this process, who's actually doing the search? Is it the student that's doing the search? Is it the parent? Is it both? What do you usually see?
I think for the first generation student, because the parent hasn't been through this before, I tend to see one of two models, completely opposite. It's usually either the parent is so uncomfortable with the process that they let the student lead, they let the student do the search much more, or they are so unsure of the process, they want to make sure they don't do wrong by their student, and they completely hover over the process and become the stereotypical helicopter parent.
Okay. And so what is confusing about this search process? And where are they getting bogged down? Where are they getting apprehensive?
I think, and I started in college admissions in 1988, and I think we put out far more information than we did in 1988. And you would think that would be a good thing. But I think for so many, it's just so hard to go through the 4,000 search pieces and the 15 texts and emails that you received today and sort out, well, what's important? What should I be looking? Because I can't read all of this. I can't read all of this literature. I can't read all of these websites. I can't look at all these texts and sort through these 4,000 schools. So somebody tell me, what's this? The other hard part, I think, is the terminology. It's what do you mean by EFC? What is a net price calculator? What is, when you give me an SAT score, is it out of 2,400 or 1,600? And they're not even thinking that. But
Right.
It's these little terminologies that we don't think twice about. It's the dreaded early decision versus early action versus early something else. So we speak our own language, and sometimes we don't realize that. And I think it can be confusing to any family and any student, but I think particularly with first generation because they don't trust their instincts.
Yeah, I think one of the points that you made earlier in this conversation and in previous conversations that you and I have had that really kind of hit home to me is that these students and parents are not trained admissions professionals. And we tend to take this lingo and the tools that we use for granted. And talking to someone who has never seen this before, you told me to take the approach of having a new employee on the set and how you would begin to start explaining this process to them. And it seems like such a logical route to take with a first generation family, but it's not the route that we always take. So I appreciate that kind of insight and a friendly reminder to all that these folks are not trained in what we do and need a little bit more guidance.
I had that conversation online, I think on LinkedIn, where somebody suggested we'll use net price calculator because that's what they're familiar with. And I'm thinking, they don't know that. Tell them what the sticker price is or what the price is or what the quote, but terminology that, and this is not just a first generation student, but just terminology that they would understand as regular, I'll use the dreaded word, consumers of college.
So when we're talking about college fit, which is my favorite topic to talk about, and we're talking about first generation students who are going through this process, and we know as higher education professionals that first generation students have a really low rate of retention and completion in higher education. And that is one of the biggest challenges that I think higher education faces. So as an admissions professional at kind of the front of this funnel, what is it that we should be paying attention to make sure that the student is finding the right college fit, and hopefully in turn that fit will help provide them a space where they can succeed, where we will find higher retention rates among these students and completion rates too.
Well, and first, let me agree entirely with you about fit. I used this quote in my last blog. I think you retweeted, so thank you. But a match to be made, not a prize to be won. And I think first generation families are very a student may visit a school and say, this is great. I like this. I like the faculty. I got to know them. I was impressed with the facilities. Mm-hmm. And then turn around and not see that anybody's ever heard of that school, or it's not in this list or this ranking, and feel very insecure about that choice. Right. So I need to stress fit as much as you, but probably the best thing, I use my other prop, is the visit. Yes. We all send you these pretty pictures on perfect days in October when the leaves are the right color, red and gold. But you need to see what the campus is like. And sometimes that's hard, the more distance that's involved. But Sure. It really is the best way for a family and for a student, particularly if they're not familiar with the process, one, to become very quickly familiar with the process.
Sure.
And two, to have a better sense, this is the school that's right for me. This is a school that's going to get me where I need to be in 4 years, as opposed to the prize, so to speak. So right. To me, nothing better than visit.
Great. And I think that is a great point to be made. We talked a lot last week about kind of all of these overarching goals and opportunities and challenges that we face. And now we're able to get a little bit into that strategy. So how are students able to measure fit? And I agree, the campus visit is one of the most important parts. But, thinking about our changing demographics of students, what is it that we can do to allow students to visit easier? And is it a virtual visit? Is it a on-campus visit? How are you seeing students react to maybe those more non-traditional ways of being able to interact with college admissions office, or doing a virtual campus tour or something like that?
The virtual visit certainly is an important piece. It certainly has its place. Sometimes it's the lead into the physical visit down the road, particularly when you're talking about a student looking at schools that are out of state, hundreds of miles away. It's not quite the same, but at least it provides some way of narrowing that list down from 40 to 20 to 10 to maybe 5. And it certainly can replace a visit if necessary when you're talking about long distances. One of the other things, I don't know if I'm jumping here, but we had talked about blogs, and I think that's one of the conversations I think is very important in terms of first generation families. Is you want to help them through the process, but you don't want, as I speak to admissions professionals, you don't want to be patronizing. You don't want to do a one-size-fits-all. And I think the idea of blogs, the idea of, oh, that person reminds me of me, yes, or that person went through what I went through, or went to a similar school, or an idea that you and I said, I don't know that I've seen, I think you might have, parent blogs, where for a parent who's equally unsure, in some ways as a parent you feel worse about being unsure in this situation, seeing a parent that's gone through this saying, oh, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. And I think that's an opportunity that can grow in the future, is more parent blogging, but just the idea of a student being able to go through a virtual visit or a website and say, I recognize that individual, that person, they did it, I could do it there. I think that's an avenue that can be continued to be explored, student and parent blogs.
Yeah, I had a huge light bulb when you brought that up in one of the earlier conversations that we had, just kind of laying out what the challenges and opportunities are for these students. And a parent blog is one of the best things that I've heard. thus far in terms of strategy, and especially for those first generation families, they're really going to be great resources for not just other first generation families, but for any other parent that might be going through this process. Assuming they're asking the right questions and they're working with an admissions office to relay the correct information, I think it's an awesome step to be taking. So I hope that we do see more parent blogs getting up on college websites, and whether that's through parent associations or outreach from the admissions office itself, I think it's an awesome idea. So thank you for bringing that topic up. So last kind of point that I think I want to cover in this search process is what other areas of support or guidance might these students need? Whether it's the admissions office preparing them for their time. So I guess now I'm thinking maybe post-accept. How are we able to kind of convert these students into feeling comfortable? You mentioned they have trouble kind of leaning into their intuition and going with their gut. So what is it that admissions offices can be doing to kind of help in that post-accept time?
And here's where I'd say they don't have the intuition. Is one of the things that college is different than high school is college is less seat time. You're only in the classroom 15 hours a week, 12 to 15 hours a week, as opposed to about 30 in high school. So I think particularly for students who have no role models in terms of what do you do in college outside of just going to class, is the importance through orientation, through admissions and handing off to student services of join organizations, join clubs, get involved, be involved with the professional society for your major. There's much more than just the classroom if you want to succeed in college, and I think it's a tremendous retention tool. And if not used, it's the poor first generation student unsure of himself or herself sitting in their dorm room. And you talk about attrition rates increasing. That's a great way for that to happen. So I think it's the admission orientation student services role to make sure that the first generation student understands the importance of the outside of the classroom experience, student clubs, organizations, professional organizations, those type of things. So I think that's probably one of the most important things that they can do. And part and parcel too, I think, for parents, it's different. No longer can they call up the guidance counselor and complain or voice their feelings in the same way. And when sometimes they find, well, what do you mean I can't see the grades unless 3 pages are signed? And it's a different experience. And I think for them, what are the outlets? What are the parent organizations, the parent associations that they can get involved with? Because again, for them, it's very different than high school was. So I think for the student, it's how do you get involved in student services and in organizations? For the parent, it's how do you get involved in parent organizations?
Great. I know you touched a little bit about net price calculators and the confusion with lingo earlier in reference to that. And I know we could probably do a whole separate show about navigating the financial aid and trying to understand college affordability for the first time.
That's a good topic for you for another show.
Yeah, definitely. But is there any kind of insights that you can give, maybe, some of those top questions that you might see from families as they are navigating through this process for the first time?
Deadlines. When do I do this? What is a FAFSA? If they're using, what's a CSS profile, even if they're not applying to schools, just so they know what that is in case that phrase comes up. Explaining that an EFC is not what we expect the family to contribute, probably, but what it does do, and without going into detail, but just going some way, having access to that information. What is an EFC? How am I going to know how I pay this? And that may sound, for someone on the admission side, overly simple, or for the financial aid side, overly simple, but it's not. You go through applying to college, applying through the FAFSA, getting a financial aid package, possibly getting scholarship information before that. You get all these other pieces. And even when you get the financial aid package, which is generally viewed as that final output document, well, that's not the bill. And there's a lot of confusion on that. And I think it's hard and you feel silly because I should understand this. And it's not that simple.
Right.
So I think it's not so much going through the numbers at first. I think it's more for the student that you're working with in the fall, at least, or even the early spring. This is where you should be at. Have you filed a FAFSA? Do you have questions about it? Did you receive it back yet? At least that they're on the right timetable, that they're on track.
So for universities that might not be able to, excuse me, go through that kind of hand-holding process as much with a student, maybe they have really high volumes. Is there any kind of information that they can give or provide online or in print materials? What is the best resource for someone who might be going through, let's just stick to that financial aid process for right now. It sounds like dictionary definitions or frequently asked questions are something that doesn't sound too glamorous, but might be helpful. Are there any best practices out there that you've seen that have really helped families navigate through that?
To me, it's the website issue. It's how many clicks and how clear is it to know, A, tuition, B, when do I do things? And those, I think, are the biggest, and C, how does financial aid work? But I just want to be able to click in tuition, and I don't want to have to go through, figure out, do they mean this? Is it this office? Does cost of attendance is an interesting word, and it's an interesting phrase. And I think the more simple and intuitive we make our website menu choices, the better off it is. I mean, it's easier for me doing independent counseling and doing my research for families. Even I, who spent 23 years on that side, it's not always intuitive. Do I click Bursar, cost of attendance, tuition, and fees? Which button do I click? And I think the more a family could go to the website and say, oh, I want to know if I'm on calendar or deadlines, click. Tuition, click. Financial aid packaging, click. And even if it's general information, at least then a larger institution avoids those phone calls about all the details that they don't need to. But sometimes it gets very buried in websites. And I know I've been on website committees. It's not always easy to get everything the way you pictured in your head. But the easier we make those websites, the better off it is for admissions, for Bursar, for financial aid, and especially for the student family.
Sure. And so let's go and move ahead into the decision-making process then. As students are making these final decisions, this is one of the biggest decisions, not only for the student, but for this family who has never had to make this kind of a decision before. What are the biggest impacts in that decision-making process? What really stands out? What kind of questions are they asking? And then, of course, what we want to know is how can we help support these students in that decision-making process? What is it that we can do to help them?
There's a lot in that. One is, I would say, be consistent in message when it comes to the May 1 deadline, when it comes to the phone calls you're making. I've had many families completely amazed that we're asking 17-year-olds to explain why they're debating between college A and university B. And it's not something the typical teenagers have ever had to justify before. So I think understanding, being a counselor, that's the moment you become a counselor more than any other. I think for the family, one of the things that I try to guide them through is not get hung up on just one school too early in the process. Because if that's not a school that accepts you, then what do you do? I think in terms of going back to aid, again, it's the issue of talk to families clearly in terms of, again, what's coming out of pocket.
Yeah, and I want to just cut you off right there because you're about to ask or answer a question that just came through on Twitter, and I think you're about to answer it, but I want to make sure.
I'm not looking at Twitter.
I've got it right here. Question came in from Seth Odell, and is asking you, are you concerned about unethical institutions targeting and exploiting first-generation students for number of applications, for money? Have you seen those kinds of practices? And, is that a concerning thing in the consulting world, in the counseling world?
It always is. I don't particularly, I'm not seeing a run of it. I'm not seeing
Okay.
And part of it goes back to the way we started this conversation. It's kind of hard to find first generation college students, and they come in all shapes and sizes.
Sure.
I will say that the not-for-profit industry and more of the established for-profit industry, you don't see that. I haven't seen that. I don't see signs of that.
Okay.
There are some that you worry about that. I don't see it more in 2012 than I saw it in 2002 or I saw it in 1995.
Okay.
In fact, I see it less. So,
okay.
For what it's. Yeah.
So not necessarily a trend, but maybe something that has been there. That you're always conscious of and aware of. I think we can always do better with our transparency. And transparency now is becoming more clear to me that this language that we're using and these terms that we're using are another barrier to entry for these students. So I appreciate that commentary, but I didn't mean to cut you off before.
What I was going to answer was not exactly set.
Okay.
It was more, I think, the innocuous misleading of when I don't know exactly how work study fits into a package and it's not money that's coming off my bill. When I don't know how these loans work and that I can take some of these loans. When I'm not, when I don't fully understand what the bottom line is, and part and parcel with that is I'm a big believer if the difference is not great, and everybody defines great differently, and every family defines great differently, but you want a school you're going to graduate in 4 years or maybe 5. You want a school you're going to graduate from. It's going to be a lot more cost effective to finish that school than pick the school that was a little more affordable, and then you come home after sophomore year with a 1.7 going, I don't need a new school. That's going to cost you a lot more, even though you save $2,000-3,000 up front. So. Sure. I think that's part of the education process. That's hard coming from your side. I think that's where my side and the guidance counselors have to be diligent, is be aware that the money that you save or lose because you choose a school that's right for you or a school that you're not, you choose the fit or you don't choose the fit, is far more important in terms of finances as well as everything else than $2,000 or $3,000 comparing financial aid packages. So that's a hard lesson to explain to somebody, but that's something that I try to stress is you're going to save a lot more money if they finish in 4 years than if they take 7 years at 2 different institutions taking 150, 160 credits.
Sure. Great point. I love that. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I've gotten out of this is that student comfort level is a big part of the decision-making process for the student, and that it's really hard to find that comfort level if you don't have someone in your family that's been through this process before and does feel comfortable with it. So I think you've given us some great strategies as to how to answer their questions better or bring some of those successful students to the forefront. But I want to kind of wrap up with a few key takeaways. So are there what are the biggest takeaways that you could give to both the admissions counselor at the university and the school counselor that's trying to help these students find their right college fit?
It would be visits, virtual, but particularly on-campus visits are so important. It would be from both sides, look for peers, student tour guides, student bloggers, Anybody who you say, I can identify, and if that person's succeeding there, maybe this is possibly a school for me. It's the idea of calendar. I think the more as these families receive so much information and try to sort through, and oftentimes simply just block it all out. And I can tell you, as the father of two teenage boys, I have a big stack of college brochures. And again, I'm in the business, so to speak. The more we can say, this is the page you should be looking at, or this is the website you should be looking at, or this is the date you should be fully aware of, because if you don't make this date, you'll lose out on that scholarship, or you don't get financial aid, or you're going to miss the admission for that program. The more we can cut through the other pages that are important to other students, the better we serve those students. And again, as we said, terminology. It's speak the language of the family. I don't know that this is strictly first generation. It's not. But make sure that the family knows what you mean when you say AFC, or knows that when you say our average SAT is 1250, that you mean out of 1600, not out of 2400, unless you mean out of 2400. So right. that you, and it's so easy to fall into that trap. You've just been trained to be this great admissions counselor speaking the admissions language, sure. But the ability to translate back to layman or what have you, or to student, right. is so important. And yes. I think it's a hard skill. And I think the more we can do that, the better we serve, particularly the first generation, because they're the ones who least understand those terms and are most uncertain about what they think they understand.
Great. I want to make sure that we answer any questions that are coming over on the Admissions Live hashtag. So if you've got questions for Michael, please go ahead and fire them away. We'll also be taking those questions after the broadcast. So please continue to tweet at us today or anytime that you might be watching this broadcast in the archive. Before we move over to any of those that might be out there, Michael, what really should these admissions counselors specifically, let's pick on the institutions, let's pick on the colleges. Okay. What should we be doing differently as colleges and universities and enrollment? What are we doing wrong? Or what is it that maybe we should just be fine-tuning or doing a little bit differently?
And we're speaking on an online chat through Skype that's going to be on YouTube. So I'm a big believer in social media, but I go back to the idea of conversations with. The more you can make it specific to families, the more you can make it a conversation. I think the days where it's effective to send 40,000 pieces of something are gone. And I think they may give some information to somebody who's already looking at you, but the more you can have these type of conversations, the more you can have the live chats, the more you can have, and some of these forms are used better than others so far, but these are all going to grow. Whether it be Twitter, whether it be whatever replaces Twitter, these are all going to grow, and these are all going to be very individualized. The more college admissions folks are prepared for that, and I think it's just going to make it easier to have conversations with people, because it won't be, here's the one-size-fits-all view book, here's the one-size-fits-all search piece. It's going to be, well, what's your question? Okay, this is my answer to you, and I can then immediately tweet to the next person or Facebook to the next person. So I think social media directly and indirectly is leading us to what I would think the best changes can be, which is more individualized.
Great. I love that answer. We've got actually a couple of questions coming in over Twitter. One from Marv from Welcome to College. And Marv asks, what's the best online resource that you've seen for first generation students?
Oh, I'm not. You just listed 4 sponsors at the beginning of the day. I'm not going to. I'll give you a very generic advice. It's that they should use multiple sources. I'm going to stay away from mentioning any particular names, because I think there are several very good ones out there. I also think there are several very bad ones out there, but I think families should use those resources, contrast and compare. There are some great resources to compare schools. There are some great travel, talk about visiting, there are some great travel sources out there for campus visitation and campus tours. There are other sources that are great online, but I'm not going to recommend anybody particularly, but I think my advice would be contrast and compare. If you have any concerns or you like a site and you want to confirm that that's a site that's respected, go to your guidance office, go to the college reps that you're working with, if you're working with an independent counselor, go that route. But it's such a new field, and there are multiple good sites, but there are so many sites out there right now, so
Sure.
I'd be careful.
I understand not wanting to call out any certain company in particular, but is there any kind of resource that is that you would recommend over another? I'm going to be biased and hope that you wouldn't be showing them all the college rankings or and starting them there, or having them live and die by something like that kind of a tool. But I'm not sure if you agree. But is there any kind of tool that you're encouraging students to use as a resource, whether it be social media or blogs or matching services or your basic Google search? Where are they getting started?
It's usually through those college search organizations.
Okay.
And there are probably, I guess, about 5, 6, 7 that are right now very big and very good. Or it's directly to the college website, because to answer your question about college rankings, for what it's worth, and I've done a blog called College Rankings, and I said, it's where I'm talking to a student. The student asked me, "Did you see that they're out?" I said, "I don't care." So not that they don't have some purpose, but the only ranking that matters is yours. I'm not the student.
Great.
But to me, it's the online contrast and compare services. And it's the individual college site, because you say, I want this program, or I want to know if they have community service or religious affiliation. Well, you can find all that on their website, and you can find in their own language. So that would be my answer.
Have you found if there's any resources that are out there that are specific to first-generation students? Marv is changing the question up a little bit.
I haven't, and that might just be I just haven't done the research.
Okay, yeah.
I'd be surprised it's not out there, and I'd be surprised if it's not out there, and if it's not, that's something that somebody should jump on.
Yeah.
But I do not know of one.
Okay. One other question before we wrap up. We've got Janelle asking. She works in a technology vision role at her university, and she's asking what she should focus on to support first-generation students. So.
Technology is in what goes on the
I'd imagine the technology vision role would be looking forward and what the university should be going after technology-wise.
Right. I divided those words instead of putting them together.
Okay.
Again, to me, besides the obvious cloud computing, access to individuals, social media component, to me, it's utilizing the website to get information out simply. I'll give you something I use when I talk about what I do, but to me it's accessibility and applicability. And if college websites can do that and college technology can do that, all the better. And that should be everything from YouTube to Facebook. I'm surprised how many colleges don't utilize all of the facilities that are out there for them.
Great. And I've got just one last question I think we've got time for. Question is regarding applications. So can you speak about paper applications and first-generation students? Is there any kind of trend or any kind of desire maybe to have a paper application? You seeing anything like that?
No. I think that holds more true of the parents, and I'm not sure that's first generation or not. It's
right.
But for the student, I don't see that so much. I see it a little bit in terms of socio-demographics more than I see it in terms of first generation, not first generation. But in general, students will play by the rules given them if they understand what the rules are, and most of them have access to a computer, if not own one themselves. So I'm not seeing that. No.
Great. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up the show. Again, if you have more questions for Michael, he will be available. Catch him on Twitter at MichaelCCR. And you've got all of his contact information. We'll be archiving that on the website when this show is archived and up later this week. So thanks again, Michael. I think this was a great conversation. I hope we can keep continuing this conversation. Michael's also got a great YouTube channel, but really fantastic LinkedIn group. I have rarely seen LinkedIn utilized the correct way, but he has some really great conversations going on over in LinkedIn. So if you're interested, I'm sure he would let you in and have a peek at what's going on over there.
And I'm just the moderator. There are some great people, and we're having real conversations about college admission. So if you're in the field, join it. It's just college counseling for the rest of us.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great group. Really have been enjoying it just in this past week. So thanks again for coming on. I am going to be wrapping up this show, and I want to introduce everyone to our topic for next week. I'm going to be joined by Eric Felix next week.